Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill, and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer himself, your friend and mine, Jeff, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Conrad, how we doing in the summer of No Worries 2?
Man, I went around for the summer of No Worries 1, but this summer of No Worries 2 is kind of hitting for me.
I'm telling you, you've had a big lordy, Connie's 40. You've been traveling. I've been traveling. I've been doing lots of family stuff and vacation like you and podcast, and got a couple of side projects that might turn into main projects. And you've been busy, and life's good, my friend. Life is good.
Yeah, I'm glad to be home. I don't have any travel now for like 6 weeks, I guess, 7 weeks. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Wow. That's, I guess, well, we're doing podcast movement. Is that supposed to be announced yet?
Yeah, but that's not really travel for me.
That's what I'm saying is that's all that may be, you have to leave the Huntsville city limits in a month for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I do have to leave the city limits, but I just meant like, you know, I've grown weary of plane travel. It's not my favorite thing anymore. I didn't used to mind it because I was on like 3 planes a week for years and years and years. But during the pandemic, I went so long without it. And then I was fortunate enough to, be able to fly private a couple of times. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that the old way ever again. I'm spoiled. So now every time I have to get on a plane, I'm like, oh, I hate this.
Oh, poor guy.
I know, man. I think I might just become a hermit. I might just hole up here at the house, and hey, if you want to see me, come to me, because I ain't going nowhere. I'm becoming Jim Cornette at 40 years old.
But poor Conrad, you got to stay in the Conradison all the time. Bless your heart.
It's just terrible. It's just terrible.
As the saying goes, you got to go back to work to get some rest. Yeah,
exactly. No, that's exactly right. But I'm excited because what's that old cliche? If you enjoy your work, you'll never work a job in your life, or whatever. I'm doing that today because we're talking about old wrestling, and we've had a lot of fun here on the show. And I don't know if you saw what I saw, but I got great feedback about your version of events from last week's episode, where we talked about Hulk screwing Hulk at Bash at the Beach 2000. What a mess all these years later. People enjoyed hearing your take. What was the feedback you saw?
You know, as you have clearly stated, specifically over the last, 90, 120 days, is that, hey, Jeff, these stories have been talked about to death, and you're right on that, but nobody's heard your side or your thoughts or what you were thinking at that time. And, the quote unquote, here I go again with my, but the night I held Vince up, that episode, and just those, but this Bash at the Beach was one of those that I actually got a couple of phone calls. I always get some DMs or texts or like, hey, I listened, enjoyed it, or something but that night was crazy. It was such a microcosm everything right and wrong with WCW in those last 18 or 24 months. So it was, it's been a lot of fun to hear the feedback. I think this show that we're going to do today, we'll get like, oh, that's what that title meant. How the Titans saved TNA. We'll get there, but yeah, the feedback and I also got several of those. God, Jeff, I hated your guts, but that story made sense now. Now you made a little bit more to Bash at the Beach. Now I understand it.
I'm curious. You teased it. What type of calls did you get? Who called about the whole Bash at the Beach debacle?
Well, the low hanging fruit, Dave Pinzer. Free family member. I'll reveal his name because he doesn't mind it, because I think he actually put it out on Twitter. Some talent, but no, Pinzer was like, hey, I knew, but I didn't know, but I knew Booker was winning. And I'm like, I still don't think a lot of this adds up, because what if I wouldn't have gone along? I mean, there were so many what ifs going into it. I think a lot of people understand more about Hawk's clause as far as creative control goes, but it also opened up so many more questions that, like, what does that clause actually mean in a contract? Yes, it controls what goes on in his matches, but how far reaching does that go? Like, okay, I'm not. So if he wanted to have a match with anybody at any time, could he have done that? So it opens up a lot of questions, and it also goes into how Vince McMahon has always dealt with it over the years, and that dark side about Warrior walking through the curtain and all that. Ultimately, the creative control clauses just don't work out in the end, and I understand it from both sides. I really do. I completely understand Hulk wanting that in there, but in the end, it's the vision. It's the buck stops with one individual, and once you add just one more to that, even two people, it's hard for a lot of folks to decide on what kind of pizza they want, let alone a career direction, or company vision or company direction. So, but Pinzer was the funniest of the calls. I'll say that.
I get it. It's a wrestling podcast, but he's saving us money on our mortgage. Do you really trust this process? The reviews don't lie. 5-star review after 5-star review. We make it fast, we make it easy, and it's no cost or obligation. Give us a shot to earn your business. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did, especially if you like keeping more of your own money. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket, so what are you waiting for? Hurry to savewithconrad.com. Well, I'm excited about it. By the way, Dave Pinzer's Sitting Ringside with Dave Pinzer is available now at adfreeshows.com. Let's jump into it. How the Tennessee Titans saved TNA. I know, doesn't make any sense, but bear with us. Let's set the stage. You're coming off that reeling news regarding in demand and cash flow. If you haven't already, go back and check out the archives. We're doing a great job sort of documenting TNA from the very beginning. But a few weeks in, now that you're settled into Nashville, we got our feet underneath us. Things are normalizing a little bit, but also too, we didn't sell quite as many as we hoped. Of course, the whole Jay Hassman story is the precursor to this one, but the show ends and you have to turn around in 1 week and have now your fourth show from Nashville. And there's some big news going on between that third and fourth show in the form of your old pal, Vince Russo. He's officially being hired and brought in to write the shows. Tell us how this came to be from the best of your recollection.
I was curious, just knowing what the title of this episode is and how, what's your notes and where you were taking the direction. And this obviously refreshed my memory that he was brought in to write the show. That, he was going to be a collaborative of the show, maybe the lead writer. Obviously, my father wasn't a lead writer as far as writers goes, maybe booker, not writer. And then, we had. Well,
time out. Explain the difference. A lot of people are going to hear that and think those words are interchangeable. Different, or you have a different philosophy. Let's hear it.
Oh, okay. Man, stop down early. So okay. I'm putting the ball. I mean, I'm going to put this one on you. This is sidebar number one.
Okay, good. This one's one for me. Got it.
No, a booker, someone who a matchmaker. I like because I've been asked this on radio interviews. Hey, what is a booker? And they book the matches, or they're the matchmaker that literally take a card and say wrestler A versus wrestler B, main event all the way down to opening match. A writer is a script writer, truly the flow of a television show. Nowadays writers write word for word of promos and pre-tapes and ins and outs and copy for announcers and complete direction. So over the years, in the 70s, there were bookers that would basically format a TV show. And then in the 80s, it began to change. And then the 90s, it drastically changed. And then the evolution, fast forward all these years later, it truly is almost minute by minute, it's scripted. But we're talking 2001, and I'm under the belief that I'm not opposed to having writers attached to the show, but they are, I like to say, stay in bullet point fashion, not word by word. I think there's a huge difference there, even for laying out matches. Don't lay out move for move or in each match. So did I do it justice for you, Conrad?
Yes, you did. So let's get back to the story. You're saying your dad, you didn't feel like could be a writer. He could be a booker and say, this fella should have a match with that fellow, but maybe not a lead writer in today's WWE version of professional wrestling that you're competing with. Why did you feel like it was necessary to have a Vince Russo?
Going back to the total nonstop action mentality, the NWA is traditional wrestling, heavyweights and tags, and truly a very solid in-ring product. But also knowing that we need to get outside the box, and we can have traditional characters, but also let's have a Mortimer Plumtree, or that's maybe a good example, or maybe a bad example, or the Flying Elvises, if you will. And Vince, through the Attitude Era, love him or hate him, he had a lot of success. But when I think back to those days, especially as they sit here in 2021, in the Attitude Era, there was Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara. That was the two writers. There were two writers of Monday Night Raw. And I just think when you add a team of 10 to 12, it really, per show, it really, I don't want to say waters down, but each individual writer. And over the last couple of years, the one-on-one relationships I got to have with different writers, just such an incredible talent pool. But man, it makes for a confusing vegetable soup at times. But back on point, 2001. Jeremy Borash wore a lot of hats, and I think he's good at character development and writing. Bill Banks, I don't think he was on board yet at this time. But anyway, Vince and Ed Ferrara was our color commentator. So Vince was going to be the sole writer of the 2-hour total nonstop action.
Well, hang on now. You just said Borash could write some stuff and Ed Ferrara was doing commentary. But then you landed on Vince was going to be the sole writer. So you didn't want
good clarification. That was, everybody wore a lot of hats. At the end of the day, it was on my shoulders. No matter how you slice it, dice it, I ultimately had the buck stop with me. So I wanted one guy that was there. I mean, hell, in those early days, Bob Ryder contributed ideas and thoughts and different.
So the idea being, a lot of other guys wore a lot of other hats, but you needed one guy that was completely dedicated to that, and that was going to be Vince Russo.
Correct, and could spend the amount of time that it takes outside of those 2 hours. Lots of phone calls, lots of discussions. And I'll just say that it takes a lot of rolling up your sleeves and really getting down. I'm a big believer, and I carried this through and to this day, of really getting in the mindset of the talent and understanding what they like and don't like, and how they can make it better, or maybe better said, how they can make it more their own. We'll give them the guidepost, but ultimately, we all got to get in the end zone, but you can get there multiple ways.
Talk to me a little bit about how your dad came around to agree with you here. I don't feel like I'm jumping to that conclusion. Y'all were probably making a lot of these decisions together. And he expressed in his book several times how uneasy he was with, for lack of a better word, Vince Russo's style. And now you're going to have them working together. How are you navigating that as sort of the monkey in the middle?
Like he taught me, and I'm paraphrasing and putting words in other people's mouth, or look, hindsight's 2020. But the reality of the fact was, hey, Dad, you do what you do good. I'm going to do what I do good, and let Vince do what he does good. And at the end of the day, we hope we score a touchdown. As far as this is 20 years ago, so Vince was younger and had just come off a red hot run. That's undeniable.
Well, hang on.
Here we go.
He was red hot when he was in the WWF, but you considered his booking in WCW to be red hot?
No, I didn't say that, did I?
You said he's coming right off of a red hot run. No, he had cooled way the fuck down.
Oh, okay. So so all of a sudden, all of Vince Russo's crappy writing.
Well, hang on now, Jeff. Are you really going to act like people don't believe that, quote unquote, you're only as good as your last match? Now, I'm not saying overall, but I'm saying in sales, people aren't talking. Don't come to me and brag about I won the sales award in 2013. Well, what you've been doing the last 8 years. I'd love to hire the 2013 version of you.
No. Okay. So he had come off some wins and losses, but he had been in the ball game of writing. And I had lived the WCW, and look, Vince made some wacky stuff. But I mean, in that cesspool of WCW creative, man, how many hands were in that? And yes, at times Vince was the lead horse, but at other times he wasn't. And look, he brought a lot of it on himself, and I think he'll admit that to this day. So he had been in the game of formatting and writing and scripting 2-hour episodes, probably at that time, he probably had right up there with the most experience as the business had evolved. I'm not saying booking or matchmaking. I'm talking about a 2-hour show that had backstage and pre-tapes and everything that went along with that.
Now, we're not addressing the elephant in the room. When you're hiring Vince Russo, he technically is working with the World Wrestling Federation. Did you feel like this was a feather in your cap? Was that part of your thinking?
I think that was game, set, match already. And I may be wrong, but I believe that quick 1-day honeymoon or 3 or 4 day honeymoon was over.
Well, what they settled on, according to your dad's book, and I believe even Russo, is that he was going to be offered the position to work from home for like, I don't know, $100,000 a year, $150,000 a year. Yeah. More than what you guys are offering. Or he could accept a little less. And again, the exact numbers escape me, 20, 30 grand less, whatever it may be. But he could come to Nashville and actually be hands-on working with the product every week. And at the time he's living in Atlanta, probably not really jumping at the chance to raise kids in Stanford if he can raise them in Atlanta. So he decides to do that. You're friendly with Vince at the time. Is he expressing, Jeff, I really don't want to go back there, but they made a good offer? He accepts your less than deal, meaning he's taking less money to work with you. Talk me through that.
And look, this is one of those instances that I feel like I got pretty good recall a lot of the times, but just hearing you say that, and I can't put my finger on anything, but it's almost like, and I know kind of you're going to come up with a great analogy here, but it's basically when you go to buy a car, the guy has to go through a roundabout way. My gut tells me I didn't believe a word coming out of Vince's mouth that he really had an offer on the table, because if he had, he'd have been there. I felt like that door was shut and he was using it as a negotiating tool. And sure, come on board. Okay, you're going to take less. Great. I'm going to pat you on the back, but let's get to work. I feel like his WWF deal was so soured by his quick experience that he wasn't interested at all. If we didn't, I mean, he just wasn't. Now, if we didn't have anything to offer, he might have taken it to feed his family. But I feel like that ship quickly sailed.
Real quick, and then we'll move on. I do want to ask about the relationship with your dad and Russo, just in one more instance. I know you were sort of explaining to your dad, you do what you do well, and I'll do what I do well, but that's almost the type of conversation you would have with an employee. He is a financially invested partner. And he's been doing this a long time, and he's your dad. So I'm sure that's something he's going to work through, but I get the impression that your dad is also one of those guys who says, hey, any sort of disagreements we're going to have them behind closed doors. When we're out here in public, even if it's just around the other staff, we're going to be a united front. Was that something you and your dad had that was just sort of unspoken, where even if he disagreed, we're going to keep a brave face out here together and defend it?
Well, Manny, boy, you talk about getting complicated and in a family dynamic, and man, so much water under the bridge between me and my father. But we had those conversations probably before, during, and after. But he's also the kind of guy that would say, all right, look, we made an agreement and it's 65-35 or whatever, but you're the ultimate. And because he taught me that philosophy. He's a firm believer. When Lawler booked, he had complete control of the territory, even though my father was majority owner, and vice versa. So this is probably an opportunity here for us to have the discussion. And he voiced his concerns, and I heard them, and they were the same concerns that I heard from, day one. And also, my father wasn't on the road when I was at the WWF and WCW, the good and the bad of my relationship with Vince and the up and down. But he ultimately said, okay, if this is what you think's best, I'll work with it. And that's sort of, look, I knew that he didn't agree with everything Vince. Hell, he didn't agree with everything that came out of my brain.
Right.
Not even close. But we sort of said, all right, let's put the best foot forward and make the best show we possibly can. And knowing not everybody's going to agree what you said, let's everybody get in the same boat and row in the same direction.
Let's jump into it. Your dad wrote on the NWA TNA website, quote, I can tell you why I went after Vince Russo and was successful in bringing him in to be on our staff. Vince had a successful run in WWE, and that is a fact. I know the WCW situation better than most because of two factors. One, I tried to buy the company and therefore had the opportunity to see WCW somewhat from the inside. I turned down the job of booker/writer on several occasions because I knew the company structure would not allow anyone to be successful. Two, JJ Dillon, who worked in management for WCW, now runs my construction company, and JJ and I have spent many hours discussing the fact that no one could have succeeded in WCW because of the structure of the company. I appreciate that your dad, he's doing his best to defend his son's decision here, but it just doesn't feel like he's all the way on board. But hey, God love dads, right?
Conrad, I cannot wait for y'all to meet. And
Me neither.
Because and I just watched a YouTube video on highly successful people can turn onto the dime. They don't mind admitting they're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, all that whole mindset. But anyway, I watched one of those and I'm like, wow. And they said, I want to say it's Bill Gates that had a very strong mentality, like, hey, and I know Steve Jobs did once you cut through. But anyway, but my father, he had no problem going, okay, let's see, here's what we got in front of us. Hassman's, that situation, and here's this and here's that. What happens if Jeff's right? Or what happens if Vince's right? So I'm going to put my best foot forward. And look, how many times he did that over the years with his partnership with Lawler. He wouldn't agree with Lawler's booking. He'd say, nope, that's what Jerry wants to do. That's what we're doing.
Your dad wrote in his book that he produced the fourth show himself, with Vince Russo adding things here and there. And in the Torch, it was reported that Russo and Ed Ferrara talked for the first time in close to 2 years at this show. Do you know what their relationship was like, or how they had a falling out, or if they even did?
See, and I don't recall that. And Vince and Ed, I mean, look, even in their heyday of WWF, when they were, Vince 1, Ed 2, they didn't always see eye to eye, but they always worked together and fluently. But them having a falling out. Now, I will say this: when WCW shut down, and if you weren't a wrestler, a talent, lots of people just went in their different directions. I mean, Keith Mitchell, I remember having one of my first calls with him, and he's like, well, I think this production guy's doing baseball. Well, I think he got on full time with Turner. Well, I think this guy moved out west and he's going to be pitching reality shows. Everybody went their separate directions. I kind of feel like them not talking
is just that.
It's just, I don't think they had a falling out. I don't recall that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there is a thing, and everybody, and I know I don't think you've ever had, I guess you have. In the real world, Jeff, we all have what we call work friends. And so that doesn't necessarily mean they come over to your house or we're doing holidays with them, but we spend a lot of time with them through the week, and we go to lunch with them, and we know about their family and their kids, but we're not best of friends. We're quote unquote work friends. I think that's okay. And it sounds like that's what this was.
Yeah. So you saying that I don't know what a work friend is?
I'm just saying, these people listening to this are like me. They go to a fucking office every day. I mean, yeah. I'm going to go stretch today, and I'm going to eat real good and do chest and buys. I mean, that's your work day. I mean, these are regular people like me listening to this, Jeff.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So my regular work days starting a wrestling company is, there's more than back and bias to that, but I get it. But yeah, I was my recollection. Vince and Ed didn't have a falling out, but they went their separate ways. They both didn't live in Atlanta. Vince moved his family from Stanford down to Atlanta. They really liked it, and that's where he was raising his 3 kids.
So let's talk about, where we are next. There's some controversy leading to the NWA title match with Ken Shamrock and Amori. Amori was scheduled to face Shamrock and put him over, but Noah, that's Pro Wrestling Noah, NOAH, a big Japanese promotion at the time, refuses to let Amori lose. What do you remember about this situation? I can't believe that that's even a thing in 2002, but I guess it is. Wins and losses still matter.
Well, and that's really getting into the weeds, and you talk about granular. It's so granular. I don't have a complete recollection, but I do recall Harley Race was a conduit to Noah.
Wow.
Noah. Right?
That's cool.
Yeah, no. And Harley, man, God, what a sweetheart of a guy, and we worked together. And look, he's got his brother, the Long brothers. I mean, it goes back to the 60s of Harley having a connection to the Tennessee territory. So anyway, and me and Harley, I went up and worked for him multiple times for his promotion. But Harley was one of those guys that I always obviously took his advice and guidance and recommendations. But he also had that relationship with Noah, if I recall accurately. But I don't remember that wins and losses. Me and you have joked offline about.
Yeah. Wins and losses, how stupid it is.
But just how I don't even understand the logic, when you really get deep into it, but that's for another podcast.
Well, let's talk about your man, Sonny Sayaki. When I first saw the show, the very first time, I thought, wow, this guy's going to be a star. But a month later, it's reported in the Torch that old Sonny has himself some heat in the locker room. And also, allegedly, according to the Torch, he's got heat with management for, quote unquote, going into business for himself. What do you remember about some of the early challenges you had with Sonny Sayaki, and what do you think his upside and potential was? I felt he was going to be a big star.
Well, I love Sonny, and doing these podcasts and the startup of TNA, I brought, there's been some feelings that I got like the hospital, like, oh my God, Conrad, do we really have to go through this pain?
Right.
What a disaster. But talking about guys like Sonny Sayaki in the dressing room, and I can remember hearing the feedback. Sonny never had any heat with me or management I love a talent that believes in himself. And Sonny was one of those guys so green that he didn't even know how to be cocky. but he was cocky and was arrogant and carried himself in such a good manner. I mean, I thought there was huge box office in Sonny. I thought the way he carried him, a hell of an athlete. He was one of the young guns that I said, we're going to go with this guy. But him having heat with other guys in the dressing room, I always, to this day, I kind of like that, because that's somebody that's walking in the dressing room and he's rubbing some folks the wrong way with his mannerisms and with his thought processes. And if he can get heat in the dressing room, you get heat with the people in the arena. You just have to control that. You got to be professional, got to do business. But I like someone who comes in a dressing room and gets noticed. Now you get noticed for the wrong reasons, but Sonny got noticed, in my opinion, especially in those early days, like some other guys, for the right reasons.
Talk me through what you're saying here, because it sounds like you mentioned, well, Sonny was green at the time. So Sonny, it sounds like, and again, I don't know, I'm asking for clarification, he wasn't following quote unquote wrestler etiquette. He didn't have good locker room etiquette, because wrestling is a weird little nuanced subculture where, you know, people have quote unquote heat, and hell, they don't even know, because there's these weird little unspoken things you're supposed to do or not do. And he may not have known that, or he just came in and was it something else?
I mean, again, I wasn't in the dressing room all the time, every show, like sat in there. I was doing a bunch of other things, but you hit it. There have been guys, and not just Sonny, that they have a ton of heat and they really don't even understand why they have heat, because they hadn't been around the business. That's right. Sonny had heat. He didn't even know why. A guy like Kid Cash was a phenomenal young talent, but he wasn't as young as Sonny. Kid Cash was seasoned. He had heat and he didn't give a damn.
But Kid Cash, and again, I love Kid Cash. We're friends on social media.
Yeah.
But what I've read and seen and shoot interviews and all that, Kid Cash just runs his mouth. He'll just tell you what he thinks. I think there's a difference between, like, and I don't know, but you didn't shake hands with everybody. Well, fuck, he didn't know he had to shake, that type of thing, versus, hey, good luck on that. Or, you know,
fried chicken. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. But yes, yeah, that's Sonny. He was so green in the business. He didn't understand the nuances, what you're saying, but he did have an air about him that as he began to learn the nuances, he just, that wasn't about him. He came in, he wanted to get over. It's just sort of, I don't want to go use that proverbial phrase, the it factor. Sonny had some of that it factor, that he just had some walking, talking, I'm going to smack that guy's grin off his face just because the way he looks, but in a good way.
I got you.
He just had some box office straight from day one.
How did he feel about being a flying Elvis?
Look, a lot of folks, and I've learned this through the years, can tell me straight to my face, I absolutely love this, Jeff. Thank you much for the opportunity. Thank you. And 30 seconds later, when they get out of my presence and get away from me, they hate it. Sonny always was super appreciative of the opportunity. And I told him, make it your own. Like I told, Jimmy, and, you guys, the gimmick is only going to be as good as you make it. So right. The ball's in your court. You really got to get into it. And that goes with anybody who's put into, look, I didn't even look that I love the gimmick because the Elvis and all that, but these guys had to make it their own. We came up with 3 different type of Elvis impersonators, but look, it was a startup company. It's not like we had hours upon hours to do trial runs on everybody. So to my knowledge, Sonny was all in for it.
There's some concern regarding some of the new and older talent meshing together. It's reported in the Torch that some wrestlers were complaining about the stiffness of Loki's kicks. Brian Christopher supposedly acting like he was better than most of the locker room. I think Kid Romeo got heat for trying to get all of his shit in, as they say. Is this 2 different mindsets, guys who have been, for lack of a better word, quote unquote, TV wrestlers, versus a lot of guys who had tremendous indie buzz, and now we're trying to put that together?
Philosophically, Conrad, and I think we might have touched on this, but I'm sure as we get into we'll say it, weeks and months to come, I've always believed the best the best roster you can have is your veterans, your primetime players, your soon to be breakout stars or just on the cusp, and then your rookies or just breaking in. In the early days of TNA, we had veterans who had been around a while, guys that had one way or another screwed up, whatever it may be, and then a bunch of young independent talent. We didn't have that seasoned big box office attraction. We didn't have that. And so we did have a lot of meshing of guys that thought they were too good to be there and guys that probably weren't quite ready to be there. So it was an odd mix at times, especially this first year or two. And so a guy like Brian Lawler rubbed people the wrong way from day one, literally from day one. I love Brian, and as he matured and grew in the business, he still had that cocky arrogance about him.
Why do you think he rubbed people the wrong way? Your opinion?
Super arrogant, just super egotistical and arrogant. Jerry's that way, but Jerry knew how to turn it off backstage. You know, he's very easygoing, but Jerry playing a cocky heel, I think right up there, the best ever. Brian emulated that even when the camera wasn't on.
But now there is a difference between being arrogant and confident, right? And I know that's a fine line, but can you give us an example of something maybe you saw Brian Christopher do in the presence of other wrestlers where you thought, oh man, wish you wouldn't have did that?
Oh boy, you'd have to give me a little time. But I mean, Brian, he could play cards and you would want to beat the hell out of him.
I got you. He's just one of those guys who presses buttons and has fun.
And I mean, and Brian really meant it to be good natured, but not everybody understood Brian's good naturedness. You'd say, this guy, I want to kill him. But
you and I, when we get together, we get in a busting balls mode too.
Yes.
And when other people get in our stratosphere, they get a little shrapnel because we're in sync and we're ready to roll.
Easy.
So
Dave,
let's talk about
you, Silva. I promise. Just meet me at the loading dock.
The elephant door with the Olin Mills photo shoot. Let's jump into the building, the venue change. Again, you've just heard, hey man, we didn't sell as many pay-per-views as we thought. We got to hit the reset button and slash costs. One of those cost cutting efforts, I believe, is moving from Nashville Municipal Auditorium, where you almost felt like we could have, for lack of a better word, a residency, because the new Bridgestone Arena, well, most recently, and I guess most people listening to this know it as Bridgestone, the new big arena in Nashville has taken away all the business from the old Municipal Auditorium. So it felt like you were going to do that show every week from there. But now we realize, well, that even might be a little too spendy. What if we did the old Nashville Fairgrounds? Talk to me about the decision to pivot to the fairgrounds and what all that required, because I assume, much like ECW had to do to the ECW arena before they went live on pay-per-view, hey, we got to paint all the walls black and paint the floor and paint the ceiling. We got to make this thing look as good as we can for TV.
So the decision to move to the fairgrounds?
Yes, sir.
So the Municipal Auditorium, and I don't remember the exact, but Wednesdays, I believe they committed to, I'll just say a year, but a pretty lengthy, but they did have concerts on the weekends. And when they came in, the price tag for us to load in and out was going to be on us. And so having a true residency at the Nashville Fairgrounds was a reality. Having a true residency at Municipal Auditorium wasn't. And so, you know, there might have been a Wednesday here or, I know every year back in those days, they had a circus come in. They had a 3 or 4 day Harlem Globetrotter. They had some acts that they were still getting. And so I don't think it was a true 52 week, but close. But the expense of taking the lights up and down is, 40, 50 grand. We would have to load out. We also couldn't keep our TV truck. We couldn't keep a lot of stuff pre-hung and wired. And the fairgrounds, which, we'll probably do a whole podcast, hopefully, on fairgrounds wrestling, from Andy Kaufman to Hogan and Savage and the Road Warriors, Austin Idol, and that building was rocking. But the old women's building in Nashville Fairgrounds burned down. And so the city built the sports arena in Nashville, I'll just say this, they couldn't really say it to the public, but it had wrestling in mind from day one. So that building was built for wrestling. We knew we could get it 52 weeks a year. We knew we could hang the lights. It could become, other than taking a stage in and out, we could have the building 52 weeks a year. And it made, obviously, economical sense, but also creating our own Memphis studio or studio wrestling, much like, nowadays they created the Thunderdome, and WWE kept it for a year. At TNA, we did Universal Studios Orlando, and that was our impact zone. So it was the mindset that let's create an environment that we can have week in, week out. And that obviously removed the bandwidth of a marketing and I'm talking about a live event marketing and live event staff in a big way, and all the security you got to have from a municipal auditorium. So it was definitely a financial decision, but also a fixed location was right up there at the priority.
Another name we haven't thrown around a ton lately, Rudy Charles, is brought in as an assistant to the office. Of course, he's going to be used as a referee. We know Rudy Charles these days as WWE referee Dan Engler. Back then, what was Rudy like, and how much help was he to you in real life?
Wow. Oh man. Yeah. I will get emotional if I really, no, I cannot say enough good things. Rudy was my right-hand man. And it all started off of, it was Jeremy Borash and Ron Harris, because Don Harris hadn't even moved up from Florida yet. Bob Ryder, my father. We needed somebody who literally could work at his desk and be an assistant to Bob Ryder for travel, an assistant to Vince Russo or Jerry Jarrett for creative, an assistant to Jeff, whatever it may be. Rudy was the guy who answered the phones and was the assistant. And I believe my dad called Burt Prentice and said, "Hey, I got a guy that I think will work out." And lo and behold, good old Rudy Charles said, "Yeah, I'll give it a shot." And that little deal as answering the phones for NWA, TNA, or J Sports and Entertainment. I remember him when the phone would ring, Rudy would say, "J Sports and Entertainment, this is Rudy. How can I help you?" I mean, literally, that's how it started. And he helped me. I'm not sure where the person Jeff would be without old Rudy. He really incredible administrator and note taker and a great guy. And, I mean, he's just a great human being. But in those early days, it was young Rudy, the ref, and he looked 12 years old. And he used to bug me, "Why can't I be the senior referee?" And I said, "Look at you and Earl. Put your picture." Anyway, it was a running joke. How can a senior referee be a teenager? But
that's pretty fun.
If you hear in the, I don't know, 06, 07, 08, senior referee Rudy Charles, and he looks 9. So it's a little inside joke.
Tremendous. An ad runs in Des Moines, Iowa, according to the Torch, for your show, but you don't even have clearance there. So you're running promos for stuff that you can't actually order. And apparently there were also ads purchased for Cablevision, but you don't have clearance there. Is this just issues a new company can face without proper infrastructure? Or do you think this is just holdover from the whole Hassman debacle?
Both. And again, this was such a learning curve. And I know in your industry and any kind of business I've learned through the years, what a learning curve. Nothing replaces experience. But there would be cable companies that would run spots because they would pull it down off of in demand. In demand, again, is the clearinghouse, they're the distributor. They're the ones who, whether it's in those days, a movie coming out or a Tyson fight or, early UFC, whatever it was, they pulled down these commercials. Well, some systems who couldn't even carry us would pull down our commercial because it's in this large bandwidth. And, "Oh, I want to see that. Yeah, let's put it on." And the pay-per-view wasn't even available. Cablevision, I believe that was a specific Hassman, New York City area, buying ads. And at that time, we just figured that, okay, Jay, depends on when you're actually asking this question. Jay, you were in hopes you would get Cablevision clearance by now, but you still didn't. So a complete mess. But the cable industry pay-per-view marketing side to me, never. That's why Vince always did it in house. I mean, he took the ball in his hands because he had to, because you couldn't rely on them to market a damn thing correctly. Tough lesson to learn. I'll say that.
Let's get to the show that quote unquote saved TNA, and it'll make sense on the other side. In the opening match, July 10th, 2002, AJ Styles and Jerry Lynn are going to beat Tempest, who we know as Crowbar, and Slash, who we know as Wolfie D. They're both managed by James Mitchell. And AJ and Jerry Lynn are going to retain the World Tag Team straps in 10.5 minutes. The write-up would say good action, but not great. Lynn looked upset with Styles' celebration afterwards. 3 stars. This is Crowbar, aka Devin Storm's debut with the company. He was originally given the name Crucifix, but I believe, according to the rumor and innuendo, rejected it due to some religious beliefs. What'd you think of the match? And how was Crowbar to work with?
When you just said 2 things that jumped off the notes you gave me. One was Crucifix. I don't, there's a move in wrestling called Crucifix.
Yeah.
So I don't remember. Devin's a good dude. Worked with him, WCW, worked with him on WWA, but a hell of a talent. I don't actually recall that. But the one thing of Jerry and AJ, and I remember planting the early seeds that the student and the teacher, they win. AJ's the young rising kid, and Jerry is the seasoned vet, and he's acting as if he's frustrated at the young kid getting out over his skis. So AJ was literally, pardon the pun, phenomenally good athlete, and Jerry was such a great quarterback in those days, and really telling a story. You would never say, oh man, that Jerry Lynn, what a ton of charisma. And I would beg to differ. He may not be the most flamboyant, but what a nuanced and subtle storyteller Jerry is.
Let's talk about what's next on the program. We've got a recap of the Jeff Jarrett Scott Hall feud, thanks to Mike Tenay, Don West, and Ed Ferrara. And then we interview Scott Hall by phone. And he says it doesn't matter how many times someone knocks him down. What matters is how many times he gets up. And he said his hit list starts with Brian Christopher, then K Crush, and finally Jarrett. And Jeff, I like, since you're balling on a budget, you're highlighting Scott Hall when he can't be there. I assume you're doing this as a cost cutting measure, keeps him on the TV, keeps him on the program, but saves you some trans and a payday.
I mean, that's the obvious, but I think it probably goes with your big stars. You got 2 hours. Don't overexpose him. Get him in the storyline. If I remember correctly, didn't we leave him down? I don't say he was beat and bloodied mess, but I think we roughed him up enough that he wasn't back the following week. But phone or interview again, the episodic nature of 52 weeks a year, I think, a lot of times is just, especially in 2021, but back in those days, is overlooked. It was, and I don't even want to say slow walk it. It's just telling stories with episodic beats. And the beat this week was he didn't need to be there, but we're going to keep the storyline going, and he's going to do it via a phone call.
Next up, we've got an interesting piece of business. Brian Christopher walks to the ring and explains his actions on last week's show. And he goes on a long-winded, sort of disjointed, emotional explanation of how his father, Jerry Lawler, was never around when he was a kid. And then he said that he's going to change his ways and announce that he is now Brian Lawler and he's going to become his own man. This is interesting. Feels a little Russo-esque, not in a bad way, just saying. What'd you think of sort of airing out and maybe blurring the lines? Because I think behind the scenes, there's some truth to that Brian and Jerry maybe didn't have a storybook relationship when he was younger.
You know what's just amazing to me? You just said it sort of a Russo-esque. And do you know, if I would have pushed pause right before you said Russo, I would have bet big money that you would have said, sort of sounds Jerry Jarrett-esque. I really would have said that. That's right out of Jerry Jarrett's playbook. And look, that's why I guess Vince is such a lightning rod. But that is, my father, Memphis TV, always, whether it's Bill Dundee having his wife shave her head because there was some behind the scenes, the philosophy is always use something that is reality based. Now, look, you can't go 100% because a lot of times that's boring or not good TV, or it doesn't make sense, but use something with a foundation. And the foundation was absolutely there. Lawler married his first wife. They had 2 kids, Brian and Kay, and then Lawler, they went through divorce. And then Jerry was, like a lot of us, out on the road working 7 days a week. So he wasn't around hardly at all in Brian's early years, like never. But, Brian wasn't the only kid that didn't have a father around. But, it's always kind of unique when you have wrestler kids because they see their father on TV. Yeah. They see him more on TV than they do at home. And that's a little bit different than you have a kid whose father is,
who actually has to go to work today and has work friends, and his job isn't just tanning and working on tries and buys. Right?
Yes. But no, so there was definitely a foundation there. And also Brian had been too cool. And, that whole deal that he's going to break out and be Brian Lawler. And hell, half the world knew it was the King, and the King had a household name. He was on every Monday night. So why not at this stage? The belief is, our referee is Jeff Leonard. So don't use the last name, quote unquote, to get over. But once Brian Christopher's talent was clearly established, why not come out with it and said, yeah, that's my old man. It is who it is. And this is the direction I'm going, and it's reality based. And that's where we went with it.
So chat me up. How was Brian about the name change? He's wrestled his whole career as Brian Christopher. He's become a star to even casual wrestling fans as a part of Too Cool. But again, it says Grandmaster Sexay Brian Christopher. And now he's going with the Lawler name. Was he on board with this in general, or, okay, I don't really want to do this, but I'll do it for y'all. But outside of this, I'm still Brian Christopher.
Oh, I mean, look, God rest his soul, but to my recollection, Brian was absolutely for it. And this is where it's a little bit different. You have to have lived it. We're talking Nashville. So the whole world, rephrase that, the whole wrestling world in Nashville was well aware that that's Lawler's kid. Of
course.
So get out in front of it, get out and talk about it. Now, do it. And it's not just a storyline. It's something you can sink your teeth into. So Brian was all for it. I mean, run with it. He had no objection, because it's not like you're leaving Brian Christopher. It's Brian Christopher Lawler or BC Lawler or whatever it may be. But it's not hiding behind the fact that, oh, that's my dad and he's the lead announcer on Monday Night Raw.
So let's keep it going here. The next match is going to be Brian Lawler pinning Norman Smiley in just under 5 minutes. The write-up says a semi-competitive match meant to showcase Lawler. Smiley was fun, but not presented as a serious competitor. Star in 3/4. Talk to me about Norman Smiley. You got any good Norman Smiley stories?
Oh, the wiggle. Okay. Sidebar too. You're asking me to sidebar.
Yes, I am.
Got a good flow going here today. We're staying on point. And here you go. You're bringing up wiggle stories. Oh gosh. Norman Smiley. We always, oh man, let me think. Oh, well, the one that I used to, Norman would always make me laugh. I made him laugh one time. I think it was it couldn't have been WCW. It was the WWA tour. And I'm walking through the lobby of the Crown Casino. And when I flew down there that time, I had met folks in my WCW run, and, not a lot of email back then, but somehow, some way, the communication, and a guy told me, bring as many Slapnut shirts as you can possibly bring. Pack an extra bag, whatever it is. I'll buy them all from you because I'll sell them down here. And I was walking through the lobby, and Crown Casino is huge in Melbourne, and over at a restaurant, Norman is sitting there and he sees me lugging these 2 boxes over my shoulders, and he has to walk out, and he said, brother, I just got to ask you, what are you doing? I said, selling slap that shirts. And he says, you never miss an opportunity, do you? So we, to this day, we chuckle about that story. So I love Norman. The wiggle. You talk about getting over, and Norman is a tough son of a bitch and
Yes.
very talented. And he may be most known for his wiggle days, which tells you everything we need to know about sports entertainment.
Backstage, Goldilocks brings the mic up to a conversation between yourself and NWA executive Bill Behrens. Behrens tells you that you weren't getting a shot at the NWA title and you're complaining about it. And you're setting up the long build for you versus Shamrock, right? Do you have some sort of, it's a pay-per-view company, so you're not exactly building to a pay-per-view in the future, but I guess you kind of have to be. Did you have like a special or a concept in your brain for, all right, this is where we're going to call Bound for Glory, or this is when we're going to do, a Clash of the Champions type special? Now, I'm not saying it would be on broadcast TV, but an event, something that felt a little bigger, a little different. Did you have that in mind for you and Shamrock?
From the very beginning, we wanted to build, and I don't want to say quarterly because I almost think it was every other month. We sort of wanted to, the first of the month was, people, it's easier to buy, and they'd give us data on what their graphs look like on a monthly, that the revenue would generally trend down from the 1st to the 30th of the month. Anyway, yeah, like about every other month have we'll call it a super show. But we didn't have, we're a month in or 2 months in. We didn't have that. We just knew, or I knew, or collectively the creative is keep that vibe. And this is very appropriate for this show because that's sort of how the end of this show, that was the next progressive step. But just to continue a slow burn of me complaining that Toby Keith and Scott Hall cost me the title, and just keep that running theme along, with other, earlier in the show, we did the AJ Styles and Jerry Lynn beat, but little bitty beats through each episode that would continue to build toward big money matches.
Well, here's a big money match. And again, context is king. A lot of our listeners to this may probably not be familiar with NASCAR or Hermie Sadler, but Hermie Sadler was and is a big name in that world. And now he's going to have his first wrestling match. Yes, he's wrestling a match against K Crush, who we know is Ron Killings or R-Truth. And Hermie gets the win by DQ. The write-up says, well-booked match. Sadler got enough offense to please the fans, but the offense was always a result of Crush getting too cocky, not because Sadler actually was presented as a credible opponent against Crush. Crush scored the pin at 5 minutes and 15 seconds, but the decision was reversed when Crush took some post-pin pot shots. So 2 stars, but your old friend Hermie, who I know you're tight with in real life, you've convinced to become a wrestler here, or at least wrestle in a match. And man, how great was Ron Killings to help him get to a passable appearance here?
I didn't have to twist Hermie's arm at all. He's a lifelong wrestling fan, loves it, thinking through this, knowing we're coming up on this and how the Titans were involved. And, that's mainstream as you can get. But Hermie was, I think, 1993 Rookie of the Year and drove in every division in NASCAR, Cup and every series. And his brother drove as well. And that name, they'd been around anyway. So him being a wrestling fan and also an incredible entrepreneur, he wanted to do this. And it goes without saying how many times have I admired and chatted up and said how great Ron Killings is.
Oh, yeah, for real.
He's still a regular appearance because he's so diverse. He can have a match as a heel or a babyface, comedy, serious, championship material, tag. He can do it all. And you just said that Dave gave him a 2-star. That's pretty damn incredible for your first match on pay-per-view. And granted, going into this, Hermie he's a promoter. I mean, a big time PR marketing guy. His family's been in the car business. They've been in a little bit of all kinds of businesses, but he got a lot of publicity coming into this match, and he did it several times for us and coming out of the match. So I didn't have anything to do with his training, but I was certainly knew enough to know Ron Killings and Ronnie lived over in Charlotte, and Hermie lived right across the border in Virginia at Emporia. So I knew that the match would be not just passable, highly entertaining. I'll say that.
Let's talk a little bit about the way you booked Hermie in the match, because this is something that I feel like you can provide insight to, since you're not only the guy running the show, but an actual wrestler yourself. Let me repeat this here. Sadler got enough offense to please the fans, but the offense was always a result of Crush getting too cocky, not because Sadler was actually presented as a credible opponent against Crush. A lot of times when a celebrity comes in, Jeff, they're pulling off these big moves and they're using them on the actual wrestler in the match. And it almost offends a lot of people who are diehard wrestling fans. Like, wait a minute, we're supposed to believe that this guy can withstand this same move from all these other wrestlers. But when this funky ass celebrity does it, he can't possibly match that. Bullshit. This match was booked differently, and that feels like that's the way you and your dad would have wanted it. Can you talk about the difference?
Wow, we are really getting into the weeds here. This is so I've had this conversation through the years. I don't know how many times. And Conrad, I don't believe we've ever had this conversation, but
no, you and I have never discussed this.
I'm going to give it a shot. Because I've had to explain this to many people, even, an attorney buddy of mine, an accountant, whatever it may be. Like how, Gronkowski, I think I had this conversation last year. Well, Bad Bunny, that's another really good example. But I think when you lay out a match, there's this crazy thing called wrestling logic.
Yes.
and the logic being, look, running the ropes doesn't make sense.
Not at all.
You didn't see Conor McGregor bounce off the cage and come back with a flying forearm.
No, you didn't.
See MMA, collar and elbow, lock up, headlock, takeover. I mean, it's what we do as an art. Conrad, you all right?
Oh no, I'm great.
But just the wrestling logic of laying out a match, and I like to say, if I were to go back in time, I'd say, hey, Ronnie, whatever you're going to do out there, beat yourself. And that's, playing to get so cocky that it's your mistake that gives him the upper hand, not anything he did. And that's how you lay out something that makes wrestling logic to make a amateur or an outsider come in and look good. And it's highly entertaining. It's much more entertaining. And a lot of times a wrestling fan can't put their thumb on it other than that didn't look right. That shouldn't have happened. It didn't pass the sniff test. And it's that wrestling logic that either you pass or you don't.
So let's jump into your training of Hermie Sadler. Is that something you're working out at the house with him? Or are you going down a couple of days ahead of time, the day of? How do you put together a match with a true non-wrestler, but someone who is familiar because they're a lifelong fan?
With Hermie being on show one, and I don't have complete recollection of this, but knowing that we're going to build, because we set this up in Huntsville on some shape, form, or fashion, because Killings came out with him and Sterling Marlin in the ring on the first episode. So we were building toward this again. Ronnie Killings lives in Charlotte. Hermie lives in Emporia, Virginia. It's about 2 hours apart. You guys find you a wrestling ring, work it out. And they both had assured me that they could have a hell of a match. And I believed them, and they did.
So backstage, we see Amore warming up for his title shot, and Alicia, aka Ryan Shamrock, approaches him and he gives her a wad of cash. Did Amore know this segment, what it meant when he did it, do you think?
Hell, I don't know what it means right now, but no, I don't recall all the ins and outs. And I'll say this was a Jerry Jarrett, Vince Russo, I just don't recall this specific.
The Hot Shots, which is Cassidy O'Reilly and Chase Stevens, are going to fight Mark and Jay Briscoe to a double DQ when Malice attacked all four. Of course, we know Mark and Jay Briscoe are staples in Ring of Honor then and now. And they've both gone on to have great success as a tag team and individually and all the above. Cassidy O'Reilly, though, and Chase Stevens. What can you tell us about those fellas?
The Briscoes own those guys. So this is July of 2002. I don't know if anybody was a mainstay of Ring of Honor because they were brand new as well. I recall they launched about this time. But anyway, those are two guys that I always wish we could have got the opportunity to have them full time. But a great tag team. But Chase, which Andy Douglas came in later, but Cassidy and the Hot Shots, just a really, really good bump taking heel team that could get the job done. Always been big fans of those guys.
What about the Briscoe Bros? Why didn't you do more with them in TNA? Do you think, in hindsight?
Yeah, I don't say this as a one-off, but we didn't have the opportunity. One of them had a full-time.
They both work full-time in the chicken business.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think they could commit every Wednesday, but I may be wrong. But as the years went along, I'll say this. Now I'm getting up in 05, 06, 07. Always really, I tell you what, me and Dutch often had many conversations on one of those deals. Who's out there? Who's available? Well, this guy's under contract. Oh, this team's under contract. And we both were fans of those guys about wanting to get them into TNA full time. Never happened though.
Let's jump around. Let's talk about Jim Mitchell. He's going to tell Shamrock to come to the ring for a beating, or else they're going to continue to attack innocent victims. When Shamrock doesn't come out, they attack a ringside timekeeper. Shamrock comes out for the save, but when Mitchell's disciples overwhelm him, Omori runs out to make the save, essentially protecting his title shot. How good was Jim Mitchell here? He's like the perfect mouthpiece for Malice. Is he not?
I've said it. I'll continue to say it on our TNA episodes. Jim could create a vivid picture in the viewer, consumer, in their mind by his words. And that's a very good trait. It's the trait to have as an orator or a promo guy, is to paint that picture. And Jim, whether it was the New Church or Malice, later Abyss's opponents, Jim's great. He could paint that picture and bring you into the story and feel like you were part of it. And he's got a real gift to do that.
Goldilocks interviewed the Dups backstage before Jasmine St. Clair walked out and talked about wanting to give NWA TNA some real TNA. Then she gives Jeremy Borash a lap dance in the ring, and Bill Behrens broke it up and then got a spear from Ed Ferrara. Is this JB's idea for Jasmine to come out, or is this a Vince Russo idea? Actually, you know what? Let's just start at the beginning. Jeff, tell some of our younger listeners who Jasmine St. Clair was.
She was an ECW personality, correct?
Oh, that's what you're going to call her? Okay. She was
the JB. I don't want to say it was solely his idea, but I feel like I recall it came from the mind of Jeremy Borash.
And he booked himself to get a lap dance from the quote unquote gangbang queen.
I'm not sure that he booked himself to get a lap dance. That might have been a Russo or Ferrara. Hell no, who knows? Maybe a Jerry Jarrett. I really don't remember how we arrived at that. Obviously, I condoned it. No, I approved it. Whatever it may be. But
let me give a spoiler right fast. Some of our listeners probably need to know this. Do not Google Jasmine St. Clair if you're at work. She had a previous line of work prior to becoming, I guess you referred to her as a quote unquote ECW talent, and you don't want to get in trouble. Have to get written up. So don't Google that. Continue. I forgot to say that, but somebody just did and got in trouble.
See?
Yeah.
Bad influence.
I'm not. You booked it.
Well, okay.
I mean, it's your show, and you've got porn stars on your show now, giving lap dances. This is TNA.
In the yang, there's NWA, and then there's TNA. There's Total Nonstop Action, and then there's Hey, but I chuckle when you said Ed Ferrara. He speared. Is that what? Lay that out again.
Bill Behrens breaks up the lap dance and then catches a spear from Ed Ferrara. This is what you're doing. You got the announcers spearing the executives because they want the porn star to continue to do lap dances on the ring announcer.
That's what I'm talking about. Carry on, my friend.
Oh gosh, the Flying Elvises beat the Dups in 5 minutes. Gets 2 stars, and it's called good action. And then Jerry Lynn is going to pile drive AJ Styles on the case and call him a glory hog, effectively. Yes, breaking up the tag team champions. And then we see Omori fighting Shamrock to a no contest. So Shamrock retains in about 7.5 minutes. You're going to come out and interfere as Shamrock had Omori near a tap out. And when Harley Race intervenes, Jarrett hits him 2.5 stars. The story, I believe, that we've heard over from, anyone who's ever worked with Harley Race is that Harley wants you to quote unquote lay it in. When you're working with Harley here, you grew up in the business when Harley Race was the NWA world champion. So you obviously have a lot of respect, not only for wrestling tradition, but him personally. And he's an elder statesman in real life. Does he give you the advice now, kid? Don't pussyfoot around here. Lay it in.
Man, because I knew the clip at the end is the Titans, but the chair shot that I gave Harley was a clip, if I recall correctly. Yes, but Harley, and we worked together several times in these type deals, but he had no problem, and he would say, Jeff, I know you're safe, but damn it, you better swing it. And I think this is I don't hate to call it a highlight clip, but we use this clip often in the following couple of years. I knocked I swung for the fences, and Harley would just laugh. But yeah, it was a unprotected chair shot that would certainly not be acceptable or appropriate today. But it was without question requested by the veteran, by the multi-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion, the King, Harley Race.
Trying to figure out. He's 60 what? How old is he here? 61?
Got to be.
Maybe 62? Oh, my goodness, man.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh.
No.
So let's keep it going. Goldilocks is going to find Bill Behrens tied up shirtless backstage. And then we see Low Key pin Christopher Daniels to earn an X-title shot in a 6-man elimination match with Elix Skipper, Jerry Lynn, Kid Romeo, and Tony Mamaluke. They got 21 minutes and 42 seconds and got 4 stars. So probably the match of the night at this point. We've talked a little bit about Low Key. We've talked a little bit about Christopher Daniels, of course, a ton about Jerry Lynn. We haven't spent much time talking about Elix Skipper or Tony Mamaluke. I felt like Elix Skipper is probably, I don't know, one of the great what ifs in wrestling. I always thought his performance was great in WCW. I think he had a ton of show stealing moments, and probably one of the most dangerous things I've ever seen in wrestling happened with him walking the 6-sided cage in TNA. Can you talk to us about Elix Skipper, Tony Mamaluke a little bit?
Just unbelievable. And when they went 21 minutes and, look, and rightly so, TNA got bashed 6 ways from Sunday multiple times. And is it total nonstop action, or is it tits and ass, or is it NWA, whatever it may be. But when you hear just this episode, and there's multiple episodes, we gave them 21 minutes of wrestling time. And you give the Dups and the Elvises. Hey, look, I'm not a big timekeeper. I format things, but I think that tag match was 6 or 7 minutes, and I'm sure so the Hot Shots could have wrestled as Chase and Cassidy against Murdoch, whatever, just 4 guys, or you can put them in characters and let them still go have the same match. But anyway, 21 minutes to those guys, and obviously Chris Daniels. The QB of that, Low Key, awesome. But Elix Skipper and Mamaluke, it's a 6-way that the people probably never had an opportunity to sit down. It was something that I knew from day one that the X division really defined us in that you will not see this on Monday Night Raw or SmackDown. It's the alternative. It's a different style. We're going to highlight it. Both those guys, Elix, like you said, he really came into his own in the next couple of years. But both those guys, all 6, really, really good X division. And I say X division because they knew how to work that style.
Let me ask, if Amore had been able to quote unquote do business, would the NWA title match have gone on last? Would it have been longer than 7 minutes if you had a definitive finish? And I'm just trying to learn about your thought process and the way you structure a show.
Yeah.
Would you have started?
Highly doubt that it would have gone on last, because I'm in a big believer. The worst thing you can do to a main event is put something on before it that they can't follow.
I see.
And when people leave the arena, you want them, and that's why Lawler was so good. In Memphis, you better put him on last because you ain't following him. He knew that audience so good. On occasion, Lawler wouldn't go on last because he would know that we're either going to do a screw finish or DQ and something after it and something we need to talk about, or whatever it may be. But my philosophy is the main event earned their spot and they better deliver. But if you have some type of creative or just the mechanics that they're not going to be able to follow an earlier match, you want to put everybody in the best position to succeed, namely the brand and the company. But who's going to follow that 6-way? Nobody.
So you come to your last segment. You're going to come out complaining. You start ripping on the Tennessee Titans who are seated in the front row. You call yourself a champion, unlike these losers who lost in the Super Bowl, and they jump the rail, and you're attempting to fight them off before the disciples run out and you start brawling with malice as the show goes off the air. A lot to unpack here. Before we jump into the aftermath, who had the quote unquote plug to the Tennessee Titans? Did you have that relationship already, or was it someone else?
Yeah. So set it up. But yeah, Frank Wycheck, gosh. So you have to go into the WCW times when the Music City Miracle happened, and I wore the Titan shirt on TV, and then I wore the Titan shirt. Another time I went back to Buffalo. So, I'm a diehard Titan fan. They came to Nashville via Houston with a stop in Memphis, early 90s. So I had connections with the Titans, but me and Frank was a wrestling fan. And we had met each other at a Raw. I believe that's the first time we met, but we had remained friends, through it all. And again, we were just buddies, but hey man, we're doing these shows. They were in camp. And so Frank, come on down. Oh, we'd love to come on down. Later, Frank wrestled at a Slammiversary. So it's been me. My relationship with Frank was the conduit to everything. The WCW days, the early TNA days. We'll get into, I called Frank for advice on the Pac-Man. That's a whole nother podcast. But me and Frank's relationship was the conduit to all of it.
It's, talk me through creatively. Does he say, Jeff, can we do something? Do you want us to do something? Or do you say hypothetically and just sort of soft pitch it out there and then he has to run it up the flagpole, or what's that process look like?
Well, the offensive line, and they were a unit, and coming off 2 years prior to this, I think was the Super Bowl year. Super successful later on this year. I think this is the year they went 13-3, but a really, really good offensive line. Like they blocked for Eddie George and Steve McNair, and they were the elite offensive unit and really tight. Fred Miller, Zach Pillar, Matthews. I'm gonna leave somebody out here, but anyway, Frank and his buddies, his teammates, his close teammates, were all wanting to come, and knowing the format of the show, was like, hey, what can we do? Look, I didn't have a Sports Center moment in my mind. Maybe in the back of my mind, I've always got that there. But what can we do to just sort of spice it up, knowing the character of Jeff Jarrett is going to continue to bitch about wanting his title shot. And so I just said, hey, would you guys mind if we got into a verbal joust, and I'll shove you and you shove me back, and we'll have security. How it turned out was not anywhere close to what was discussed. The only thing that was discussed was, Frank, I'm going to shove you, and you shove me back, and then I'm going to leave you guys, and you guys sort of act like you want to, maybe Frank, you are going to come over the rail and have your teammates pull you back, and I'll have security get in between. And I was just going to verbally jab them. But the story, what was me continuing to bitch to TNA and West about me getting a title shot, and we go off the air with me ranting and raving. No physicality. What was booked.
Talk to me a little bit about, when you're laying all of this out. And again, I don't know, so I'm just asking. I've read that there's a lot of contracts that professional athletes have from their organization that says you can't do this, you can't do that. Is this a, hey, we should ask forgiveness rather than permission situation, as far as for the Titans?
Man, this is another good episode that Brian Urlacher, he came down, didn't ask for permission, asked for forgiveness. This, again, Wycheck, they came to the show. They're in the middle of camp. There was no plans for them to get physically involved at all. It wasn't even a thought. It certainly wasn't going to be a good idea. They weren't going to do it. I mean, it was, hey, man, can you come down? I'm going to have a little verbal thing. It's going to be over and done with. So they came through the back door, and it is nothing that we laid out. That's what the story a lot of times even gets sidetracked, because there's such an assumption that, hey, you're going to lay out this Titans angle. There was nothing. There was no Titans angles. It was, hey, Jason, that's my little brother. Make sure you get them in these seats for at the end of the night, because I'm going to come over and talk trash to them. And that's it. I mean, there was no laying out of an angle or a storyline, contrary to what fiction writers may or may not write.
Oh my God.
There was no angle. Well, what are you shaking your head for?
You did it again.
Did not.
All right, so let's talk about what the Torch did right. Can't believe you. The angle with the Tennessee Titan football players got carried away, according to TNA officials. The script called for Jeff to get involved in a pushing match with the Titans players, but they were not supposed to jump over the guardrail. Once backstage, Jeff Jarrett kept cool about the confrontation by telling everyone it was not a big deal. Harley Race, who was also among those backstage, ran out to check on the situation. He told friends that it was the first time in 20 years he had to run to the ring for a shoot situation. The Titans coach, Jeff Fisher, went public against the players' involvement and said such activity would not be tolerated in the future. The Observer wrote this: Tennessee Titans offensive linemen Frank Miller and Zach Pillar hopped the rail, and there was a big skirmish, most of which was pre-planned. The segment was added by Russo, so the stories about it being a shoot aren't exactly true or untrue. Everyone in the company swears Pillar got out of control and it wasn't all scripted. The confrontation was planned. Jarrett and Pillar were supposed to shove each other, but supposedly nobody was supposed to hop the rail. A source within the football camp confirmed the story we'd heard from the wrestling side, that an angle was planned out and put together, I believe laid out by Jason Jarrett, involving shoving, but that's where it was supposed to end. The idea was for the shoving match, and the players wouldn't lose face, is that Malice would attack Jarrett and take him away while they were still there sitting. Pillar had been drinking, and most didn't feel he didn't want to be shown up, so he hopped the rail and totally overpowered Jeff like it was nothing, which isn't a position you theoretically want your top guy in unless it leads to a match or footage on SportsCenter, which, as it turned out, happened the next night. Since this group is desperate for a publicity breakthrough like that, it's very possible that this was all an inside work and that only a few people were in on, but now I'm doubting that. What is for sure is that if it was, and it was all agreed upon, virtually nobody was in on it in the company. Ron Harris, who works backstage, was about to hit the ring to save Jeff, for example. Malice, who also wasn't clued in, wasn't supposed to touch the football players and only go after Jarrett, but instead he went after the players and broke it up real fast. Russo used to pull this stuff in WCW, and it was his first night in. Pillar and the rest of the players after the angle went backstage after the show and was joking around with Jarrett. Several people saw through similar fake shoots in WCW and bought this one. It kind of felt Pillar was just drinking and got carried away, kind of ribbing on Jarrett on live TV, and that's what caused the incident. Miller claimed the whole thing was set up and that they were supposed to throw blows and make the segment look as real as possible. All pro tight end Frank Wycheck, the tackle Jason Matthews watched along with a third guy who jumped in. That was lineman Barry Hall, who also threw fake punches. All are big wrestling fans, and Wycheck once drove a local sports talk guy crazy when he talked about going to WrestleMania. Titans GM Floyd Reese was upset about them being involved because of the injury risk, and all the players recognize they're not allowed to follow up on the angle. The original plan was not to build a match out of the confrontation, but when it got so much publicity, there was talk the next day of seeing if they could do something, because it's the kind of publicity this company desperately needs. Miller claimed he felt honored that people were calling it a shoot, but it wasn't, that it was staged, and he wanted to make sure nobody would be hurt. However, one of the players involved privately said nobody was supposed to jump the rail, but Pillar and Miller did. So lots to unpack here. What was planned, what wasn't planned. Talk us through it.
Oh man, Conrad, you know, as a fan, when you try to mansplaining,
yep,
you try to explain why we love professional wrestling.
This is it.
Because you just can't put there's no way that, that really happened. This is one of those incidences that to this day, it's why I love our industry, because you can't script it. You can't deliver it. We're still talking about it. The things that came out of it, everybody's positioning. I love Fred Miller saying, "Oh, it was supposed to happen." That is, let me cover for my teammate's ass.
Of course.
You could just look at all the, now we're talking 20 years later, but when it happened, and here's something that I believe a fan just jumped AEW recently, and there's chatter about that. But look, through the years, being a heel, I could tell you story after story after story that no matter how much you tell people to their just really calm, I'm going to come do this, or this is going to happen here. But in the heat of the moment, when I looked at my buddy, Zach Pillar, when I looked him in the eye, and you can go back and look at the tape and hear this, but when I laid the words in, I'm a winner and you're a loser and you choked at the Super Bowl.
Oh,
that cut so deep to those guys because they were on the field and they were 1 yard short.
Yes.
So, and definitely wrongly so. But the weight of the loss at the Super Bowl, I'm sure stuck in their craw. I mean, they were a great year, great team. But when I said that line, Zach, and rumor and innuendo, hypothetically, he might have had a couple of cocktails and dipped the canoe early that afternoon. But my brother, Jason, is the one who got in their seats. But when I said that, Zach just couldn't take it. And I'll say this, God rest Jerry Toots' soul, Malice. If the chips are down and you got somebody to watch your back, you go back, folks, and do the watch along. He knocked the hell out of Fred Miller. And Fred, if that was scripted, because if it was, then because I thought about that back then. If it was all scripted, Fred, you just put yourself in a position to Jerry. Look, I'm maybe 220. Toot was 280 and blindsided him like a chop block, like he ain't never been hit before. So the whole thing just got completely out of hand because Zach, and you can watch the tape back. It's like, oh man, he's really, oh no, Zach, don't do this. Don't do this. Oh, he's over the rail. And we're going, I'm like, I mean, yes, you ever been manhandled? That guy, I mean, because I'm like, is he really doing this? And then, okay, I'm going to try to drive him back in the ring. And he's a 300-pound guy. I take my knee and try to put it in his privates. You can look at that on Twitter as well, just to try to Zach, stop. And then Miller piled over. And then it just got completely out of hand. I'm like, this is, oh my God. And then the dressing room emptied and Jerry Toot blasted ass, and you'll see him. He wanted to grab me and say, let's go. And he got me and we got the hell out of there. And Harley came down and the whole dressing room emptied. And it was a wild melee. And Ron Harris and others, they didn't know what was going on because they knew that wasn't supposed to happen. But again, I go back to what I originally said. It's one of those things that happens in our industry that you go, Man, that was great. I don't care if it was scripted or not scripted. It was great, entertaining TV. But when we got to the back, me and Wycheck knew shit's going down. It was not a good scene. I'll stop there and let you ask questions. You're running the show here, but
no.
We knew immediately that damage control for those guys. It's not a good scene. You know, in my brain, I'm thinking, Dixie, boy, have we got a clip to service now. Let's run with it. You know, on our side, it was a grand slam. I knew that. But on my personal side with Frank and the Titans and Floyd Reese and the positioning, I knew then. I said, this ain't good for those guys at all.
So you said something there we need to circle back to. You said, oh, I knew we had something for Dixie. Dixie, we got Bob. What was Dixie doing for you at the time? Because Dixie's not an owner at this point.
So this was maybe her third show ever. and the Tennessee Titans, you know, obviously, you know, a national franchise in the NFL. And we've got a clip of their players getting involved with our whole roster. And it's out of season for the NFL. So they don't have, highlights to play. You know, this is a clip that immediately will be serviced to every NFL beat writer and talk show host and Sports Center host and whatever it is. It was a clip that, not because it was such a great clip, although it really is a good clip. It's because it was out of season in talk. You know, there's only so many things you can show with an out route at preseason. This was some action that you could talk over. It was immediately newsworthy. And Dixie was the PR agent.
Tremendous stuff. You started to say, we got backstage and Frank Wycheck, you know, tell us what the mood is afterwards backstage.
And Frank could not quit apologizing enough. Like he just like, oh my God, Jeff, I'm so sorry. I mean, look, Zach tossed me around like a dish rack. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say that at all. He's in shape, in camp, offensive lineman who I was at the end of my workday, and let's just say Zach was just getting his party started, or his party was in midstream, and he was amped up, and he tossed me around, and it got wild, and you know, Frank, smart guy, he knew that the whole dressing room emptied, and that wasn't supposed to happen. He knew that, and Frank probably took it a little bit too far in his mind, that they disrupted the entire show when we went off there. Frank wasn't seasoned or skilled enough to know, shit, we just gave them a hell of a segment. So, yeah, just like, Frank, it's cool. We're good. But, you know, Zach's in trouble. And look, Zach was 7 sheets and feeling no pain and loving it and hugging and high-fiving. And I'm sure Fred Miller, being the astute gentleman that he is, like, oh boy, like, because he was the captain, if I recall, he was the captain of the team, you know, so he's supposed to be leadership, lead by example. It was such a beautiful mess in so many directions. But, you know, backstage, I was happy from a businessman, but I knew Frank, those guys were going to have a discussion, and I was very hopeful. Where can this go PR wise? But again, let's just pump the brakes. It's a spice up angle that had really nothing to do as far as quote unquote drawing money the following week, but it was great publicity for a startup company.
We heard Dave Meltzer say, oh, this sort of worked shoot shit. This is what Russo did. And look, he did it in his first night here. None of that's real, right? That's just jumping to conclusions.
Don't get mad at me. We promise you that's complete fiction. What happened was, I'll say this from experience. What happened was when I tell you this, a direct result of too much alcohol.
Yeah, I was going to say it's alcohol. Yeah.
Yes, it's a direct result.
But my God, you knew as it's happening, I'm sure you're thinking, boy, if I can get out of this not hurt, this is going to be big.
Yeah, no, that is what I thought. I was so happy to see Jerry, and to the day he died, because he laughed and cut up, but he's like, he knew, look, he said he was sitting there watching the monitor. He's a football fan. You know, he knew when Zach stumbled coming over the deal, Zach was pissed. You can go, I mean, Zach was not happy. Is he going to beat me up? No, but he didn't like me saying this. So he's going to have some fun with it.
Well, and also too, he doesn't, wrestling, again, I don't know shit about wrestling, but wrestling is sort of built on trust between two professionals. I can trust you with my body type deal. This guy's never trained for any of that. The only thing he's been trained to do is inflict pain for real. Like,
yeah, he tossed me like a rag doll. Wall said it. He says, I knew when he slung you. I mean, you can watch. It didn't. I mean, Jerry's coming from a monitor backstage, down the ramp, out and around the ring. But yeah, it was. Tell you what, I've said it many, many times. He's the guy you want on your side when the chips are down, because he stepped right up and went to war. But it was
and by the way, again, I appreciate this is not supposed to be part of the show, and you hit a motherfucker with a chair.
You love that, don't you? I mean, it was total chaos. I'll say this: my Moondog Battle Royals from 1990 and 91 came in handy, because I immediately tried to do my best recovery and get away and find the closest chair and start swinging it.
From the Torch here, the incident with the Titans garnered TNA quite a bit of mainstream publicity. Several newscasts across the country showed clips of the incident, with some mentioning the TNA Wednesday night program. A late night West Coast edition of ESPN Sports Center also showed the clip, and several newspapers also mentioned the incident. The publicity from this, in a weird way, is one of the most important things that ever happened to TNA. Fair to say?
Absolutely fair to say.
So let's talk about what the reaction and reception was locally. Obviously, when you've got an NFL football team doing something, again, to your point, in off season, and I just want to add a little more context to that. Like a great friend of the show, Cole Kublik, just started a new morning show in Birmingham with former Alabama quarterback Greg McElroy, and they're on the big sports station there in Birmingham, the Jocks. Here's the gimmick though. People who are listening to that show in Birmingham, guess what they want to talk about in July? Same thing they want to talk about in January and in April and in September: football. There's only so much of that content you can literally fish out of thin air when nobody's practicing, nobody's negotiating contracts. There's no game to recap last night. There's no game coming up 5 days from now. So you're just searching for content. And this becomes the topic of conversation on sports talk radio nationwide, but it has to be at a fever pitch in Nashville. And of course, in Nashville, everybody listens to 104.5 The Zone. Back then, I don't think 102.5 The Game was around, but it at the time was arguably, I don't even think it's arguable, it was the largest sports station in the country as far as the percentage of the audience that listened to that station. And here you are in the middle of it, the hometown team at a hometown show, and now it's being discussed on the biggest radio show around. It's a big doggone deal locally, right?
Huge. And you have to live in Nashville to sort of understand the sports placement in the community, because prior to the Titans and the Predators, we were a college town. Vanderbilt, there's a local, Lipscomb and Belmont, some schools some folks have never heard of, but it was lots of college basketball, lots of college football, just college sports all around. Early 90s, the Titans come on board, huge. Then the Preds, and that was a game changer. 2 sports franchises in a town that never had it. The college scene was still hot. And so, we're also Music City, so lots of music everywhere. But the sports talk station created that niche. There's a guy named George Plaster. There were some names that were just household names. And then, like you said, we're coming off of any NFL cities out there realize when you get to the Super Bowl and don't win, and it's your first time there and only time, it was just huge news. And this was the core of the team. Really looking forward to the season to come. It was just Titans own the city in so many different ways. It was front page of the Nashville, the Tennessean, our local paper. It was every talk show, just a buzz going around, obviously before Twitter and all that. But I mean, everywhere you went, that was the talk of the town. in such a, I don't want to say a positive way, but it was so newsworthy. Nobody got hurt. Hey, there's our guys. That's our offensive line. They're together as a unit. And the sort of the byline, or not a lot of, it was the clip, but oh man, the Titans went down to the wrestling and kicked everybody's ass. That's sort of the story that came out of it.
Yeah.
If you watch the clip, okay, it was a little brawl, but as the story grew in stature, it was the Titans offensive line. It's the fish story.
Yeah.
By the end of the story, they beat up the entire locker room and came out victorious, and their coaches are mad, but man, we can't wait till game one. I mean, it's that deal.
So talk to me a little bit about, well, before we talk about that, I do want to just add context to what we're talking about. You want to talk about highs and lows. I think you should go start a wrestling company if you really want to experience them. You're on a high because this is the way you close the show. You've got Super Bowl athletes getting involved. You're going to be all over every newspaper, radio station, whatever, every sports section around, even Sports Center, which at the time is a lot bigger than it is now.
Yeah.
And you're 1 week removed from being told, oh yeah, you haven't made any money. In fact, you've lost it all. We had our numbers wrong. That's 1 week apart. Like oh God, I'm destitute. We've lost all of our money. What are we going to do? Shit. We got to cut every cost we can, man, baby. We just got to get a life raft to get out of here. Holy shit. I'm on ESPN and everywhere else 7 days later. That's unbelievable, Jeff.
Yeah. Wow. When you put it in that context, and that was, well, it just sort of, I can't even say that. It just goes with the territory of growing up in this wacky business. But no, it was something that, my upbringing, I will say that. And look, I'm hindsight's 2020 and looking back to over 20 years ago, but knowing I'm in it for the long haul. This is prior to the Scrushy situation.
Let's talk about that. I know we're going to circle back at some point. Scrushy's still involved. Are you having conversations with him about the Titans? Does he send you a text? Do you give him a call?
I don't know, say the next day, but we certainly sent him the clip and, hey, this is what your investment it did, that type, here's the buzz out of it, but not making it because, I didn't know what was to come out of this angle. I really thought, okay, we did it, the following day and we're going to milk it. But by the time the next show came around, we're not getting the Titans in a match. We had moved on. I didn't know how it was going to play into the future of TNA, which we'll get to when you want to. But at that point, it was, okay, great angle, great spice up. It wasn't even formatted, but the story of Jeff bitching about not getting a title shot, that was another layer of the onion that we can add to it. But let's move on and let's get into, we're moving to the fairgrounds. We got to build out that studio. And Keith Mitchell, you got to make sure, I'm in those conversations on how we're going to shoot the studio versus Municipal Auditorium. And, there were so many other things going on and talent coming in. And, obviously our budgets, we were trying to figure that out. It's going to go weekly. I mean, there were so many different things on the horizon. I didn't really, not that I should have, soak in the moment, but by probably 48 hours, by the following Monday or Tuesday, the Titan story was over and gone. So the high was over by the weekend.
Let's fast forward a little bit. We know that eventually the Richard Scrushy thing is going to become a thing. And I just want to add context to what we're talking about there. Health South has been writing checks, and you essentially have a line of credit and you can get a quote unquote draw against it. And we've broken all that down in our prior episodes. So if any of that's confusing, go check the archives. But eventually the money train from Birmingham comes to a stop. And in a weird way, the Tennessee Titans help save TNA. Explain.
Yeah. Like I just said, had I known the importance, I would have really hugged Frank Wycheck and Zach Piller and Fred Miller. But we did a show, and we'll get the dates, but it was going into, so that would have been, Conrad, the 17th to the 24th of August. no, anyway, let's just say mid-August for we'll get that later. But when I got the call from Health South that not only were they not funding last night's show, we're not going to fund the prior week's show. The line of credit was over. Health South was in big trouble with with the federal government and all that. I said, okay, I'm going to take this massive knockout blow on the chin. And I went to all of my vendors, you name it, production. I mean, whoever was owed money to, that was the accounts payable in the 30 days, whatever that whole list was, the people that I could go meet with. I didn't want to do this by phone call. I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to go meet with him. So I went around. And one of those meetings was with Trifecta Entertainment, Dixie Carter and Andy Barton. And so I called them and said, hey, I need to meet with you urgent and to give you some information. So I went in and had the conversation and told Dixie and Andy, not only are we in financial trouble from last night's show or 2 days ago show, whatever it may be, but the following week. So give me 30 days and I'm going to get us some new funding. But if you'll have a little patience with me, and everybody that I went and had the conversation, Conrad, this is where you talk about fate or divine intervention or
all of the above. Yeah.
Just all that. But I was upfront about it and said we lost our funding. But I had immediately started, from Don King. I started, okay, we'll say turning over rocks from financials. And I had that conversation with Dixie. And Dixie said, do you have any financial materials? And I said, matter of fact, we're in the process of putting that together. And she said, if you can get those to me, I think I might be able to help out. Okay. I had no idea who Panda was, who Bob Carter was. Dixie Carter and Andy Barton ran Trifecta Entertainment, and they were the PR agent for TNA Entertainment. That was the relationship. And so I said, sure. And I said, yeah, you mind sharing? What do you think? She went into it. My father, they're in the energy business, but they're always looking for outside investments. And I'd like to have this. I'd like to have this. I'm going out to the ranch with my parents this weekend, Labor Day weekend, 2002. I'm going out there and I'd like to be able to share something. So I said, sure. So had some financials, whatever it may be.
Time out. Let me add context. Again, this is mid-July when the whole Tennessee Titans thing happened.
Yes.
And Dixie's going to present this financial package the weekend of Monday, September 2nd. So less than 2 months later.
Yeah, about 6 weeks. Yeah. And so I was going to go. Anyways, they went out, had the weekend, Labor Day weekend. They do it every year around the holidays. Dixie and Serge and her family, at this time, no kids, but they would fly out and spend holidays with Bob and Janice and Todd and his family, the Carter family. And so they went out and had that weekend, and I got a call and said, do you think you could be in Dallas this week? And this is the week following Labor Day. And I'm like, sure. Yeah. If we're looking for financing, absolutely. So me and my father and Bob Ryder, we put together the financials, and because I had with my finance guys, they had, experience and they could put that together. And then we were going to put together basically a PR pack, if you will, of our 2-month existence. And obviously at the very top of this, you've got Toby Keith, and you got NASCAR, and you got Hermie Sadler, and you got the Municipal Auditorium. Oh, and you've got this thing, an actual newspaper clipping, because we had Toby material. We had all the different things outside the box of wrestling that we had put together. And when you think about, in 8 weeks, we did check some boxes.
Toby Keith, Hermie Sadler, Sterling Marlin. Yeah. Big stuff.
Athletes. Anyway, So put all that together, and I remember me and Bob taking the rental car to a Kinko's out in Grapevine, Texas, by DFW Airport, to sort of put all this together, images and all this kind of stuff. So flew out there and got all the materials ready. Went in Dallas and met with Bob and his team. And obviously Dixie was there, and, started the meeting and had the conversation and the nuts and bolts and the financing. And this happened on episode 1, and we're professional wrestling. Again, Bob Carter didn't have any real
Concept.
reference. Yeah. It was WWE, it was comparables. What's WWE? Okay, here's a publicly traded company. Wow, look at these revenues. Look at this. It was 2002 WWE financials. They'd been public, whatever it may be, 2 years. So a couple of years. And that's the circles, Panda Energy International, massive energy company, really, really big in their space. But, they weren't in the entertainment world. So we gave them the pitch. And as a part of that pitch was the physical copy of the Tennessean article of the Titans kicking ass. And as we go through the meeting, and after I spoke and my father spoke, and I'm sure Bob, don't remember all the specifics, but after we generally gave our presentation, obviously you sort of open up to the give and take of, their attorneys were asking questions, and Dixie was, given context and giving her thoughts, and everybody, it became an open discussion. But Bob Carter, being the chairman, sat at the end of the table. He just sort of sat back in his chair, and I noticed him reading this article and flipping through it. And then he would take a break from it and sort of listen in. And then when he'd say something, tell me a little bit more about this Titans deal. Tell me a little bit more about this Titans deal. So I'd go into it, and I don't want to rehash it, but Conrad, it's a lot of what we just talked about.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, it really wasn't scripted. Oh, come on, Jeff. I mean, it was walking him through sort of the David Copperfield, if you will. How did we make this magic potion? Well, Bob, we really didn't. This just happened. And then he'd go back to reading the article, and then there was pictures and the thought process. And look, he's from Dallas, so he's well aware that the Houstons and the Houston ownership moved to Memphis and the city of Houston. And look, Bob's a Texan, so he's a Cowboy and the Houston Texans, and he understood all the business and the mechanics, and certainly well aware of the NFL. But how it all sort of went down in those conversations, and we would continue talking about, I don't know, Toby Keith, or because he's an Oklahoma guy and Okies and Texans don't like each other. But no, having the wrestling conversation and just the business. But Bob kept referencing this Titans article, and he was very enamored by it. And toward the end of the meeting, he got up, took the newspaper, put it under his arm, and he got up and left.
Okay. With the newspaper.
Well, I found out later he shared that with his few folks when he left. But as we're sitting there, and the conversation goes from, I don't know, 1 hour to 2 hour to maybe 3 hours. And I know that we have our flight booked that afternoon, and Dixie did as well, and all that. And then next thing you know, Bob sticks his head in and calls me out in the hall, and there was somebody else anyway, but the specifics went down with, hey, we really like this. We've still got to work through some things with lawyers and all this, but you don't mind if we send you guys back on the private lane?
No, sir. That'll be fine. Thank you.
So going back to your early conversation, how long do you think it took me to answer? Wait, you want us to fly private? Like today? Like we don't have to go back to DFW? But no, that is, and I loved how when you were laying this out, Conrad, how the Titans saved TNA, you knew where you were going with this because you had heard just the bits and pieces of the story. But
yeah,
that all sort of worked in. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget getting on that plane, thinking to myself, I will be damned. I can't wait to tell Frank Wycheck this story.
Well, it's so fascinating. And I'll never forget when I've had fun getting to know you and hang out and just sort of pick your brain. And I take you to our favorite meat and three here in Huntsville, and you're devouring a whole fried chicken. And I'm just picking your brain saying, hey, what about when? And then I asked, how did that whole Bob Carter thing come to be? And in between chicken bites, you're like, oh, that Titans deal, that did it. And I'm like, Titans deal. Yeah. I remember when I hit Frank Whitechecker with the chair. Yeah. It was in the paper and he was all about it. Hang on. What now? But I do want to add some context. And again, I'm not trying to villainize the Carters at all. And you and I are going to talk a lot about them moving forward, I'm sure, as we sort of talk about their time and your time with TNA. But I don't think they get enough credit for all the good they did for not just wrestling fans, but folks in the industry. Yes, a lot of guys were given opportunities that they wouldn't have had otherwise without them. And I think it's unfortunate that it's become an LOL TNA type thing. Anytime Impact does anything, there's a bunch of boo birds out there, but it's a bunch of hardworking guys and gals chasing their wrestling dream. And for a lot of years, the Carters funded those dreams out of their own pocket. And I think they should be commended for that. Instead, wrestling fans online sometimes villainize it. And it's I almost read it like, do you hate wrestling? Because if there's a billionaire who's willing to write checks for wrestling, why shouldn't we just appreciate that gives the people we say we care about and we're fans of more opportunity to provide for their family, but also it gives us more variety and more options to choose from. All right. Now that I got my preamble out of the way, Bob Carter became a billionaire quietly behind the scenes. He was in almost a utility line of work. I mean, he's not in the quote unquote showbiz at all. And this may have been an opportunity for him to do something fun, brush up against something and use some of that mountain of cash that he's amassed over the years. And the idea that he could be involved with something that brushed up against the NFL and made the front page of the paper and was on Sports Center, that was intriguing to him because that was seemingly something that money couldn't buy. And again, I've never met Mr. Carter, but I understand, hey man, rich dudes, they want a yacht. Guess what they'll go do today? Just buy one. Hey man, my wife wants to go to Paris for supper. Well, let's load the jet. Let's go. But if we wanted to brush up against the NFL and make the front page of the paper, that's not something you can just go do and write a check for. But he saw an opportunity here and he jumped at it. Is my read wrong?
No. And you talk about, it's funny how you said the TNA LOL and that'll come in later podcasts when it became that. I think I've got because I've had multiple discussions with different folks of when actually the worm really turned that it came much later. But Bob, and here's something, Conrad, I don't think, Bob didn't make his big money till after he turned 50 years of age.
Oh, wow.
When you think about the risk versus reward, he's a Texas Wildcatter. He don't mind taking risk. And you just sort of really put it eloquently about, okay, I have made a fortune building power plants.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yes.
And Energy International literally built power plants, not just in the United States, all over the globe.
Yeah.
Germany, China. I mean, that's what he did, where land was plenty and you had to have wind and rain. I mean, rivers and water and all this kind of stuff. Bob is brilliant. And he saw that opportunity and the comparable, as we say in real estate, as you say in real estate, of the WWE, there was the only one. That's the only publicly traded company that, Jeff, is there space? Like, certainly. I mean, look at AEW right now. I mean, there's space in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Bob looked at that.
Let my family save your family some cash. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket, but we will save you money. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of how much. SaveWithConrad.com.
And okay, we're going to be smart about this, but people used to say, oh man, Bob Carter's fun. You know how many times, not just him, many billionaires get into business and write off risk that they take. That's how they became, in a lot of ways, super wealthy. They're not afraid to take a risk. Now it's calculated and you got to think it through and you got to know when to pull the plug. Just all the things that go into business.
Also too, it's worth mentioning, and I'm not saying that this is what it is, but this happens. You got this business over here. We'll call it business A, that's making billions of dollars a year. And you're going to have to write a massive check for
Bingo.
taxes.
Bingo.
Or we could go open business B, and it might not be as profitable as business A. Hell, it might even lose some money, but I was going to have to write that tax check for business A anyway. So if I can write a smaller tax check and actually have a little fun instead of just writing a check and giving it all away, that might not be the worst idea ever, right?
Absolutely. And when you look at the complete stories we're going to get in the months to come, it was such a minute amount in the grand scheme of things. But yes, so Bob saw an opportunity. I'm so grateful he did. A lot of people, what if, I often thought, because we had several conversations with the Don King family and what if that just so many different things. But Bob really took that leap, and it goes without saying, his daughter could be into equity in the entertainment business. So Bob, brilliant, great heart of a man. And I often have thought in that meeting, what role did the Titan deal? Because he was enamored by it. Hell, we're talking about it to this day.
Yeah.
Because watch it, because we had it. Oh, I'm leaving that out too. We had video clip of that as well that we played on the screen. We turned the lights off and said, hey, here's a highlight reel of Toby. Here's a highlight reel of Hermie actually having a match. Yeah. Oh,
you had a sizzle reel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So all that being said, it goes into a fascinating jumping off point for Panda to get into the sports entertainment industry, so to speak.
Such a great story. I know it's another TNA story, but I just love, the behind the scenes of how all of this came to be, and how if one little thing didn't happen, it might not happen. I mean, let's appreciate again the context of the timing here. A week ago, we have the rug pulled out from under us on the whole TNA. We were lied to about the number of pay-per-view buys, Jay Hossman story. Now we do this Tennessee Titans thing that we think will be a nice little way to go off the air. And oh my God, it doesn't go according to plan, and things are real scary for a minute, but wait a minute, we lived and it's everywhere. And then we fast forward a few more weeks, and hey, now not only did you not sell as many pay-per-views as you could have or thought you did, but your funding's gone. Your angel investor is gone. And somehow this crazy Tennessee Titans thing is the thing that perhaps saves the company. I mean, in hindsight, because that is the thing, you never know when you're quote unquote pitching, when you're selling. What's somebody's hot button? What are they going to bite on? What's going to get this deal done? What's their angle? What are they interested in? If we know what you're interested in, then it's easier to, cater our pitch and sell you. But if we don't know, now we've just sort of got to guess. And I'm curious, if the Titans thing hadn't happened, it's not necessarily a lock that Bob Carter would have bit, right?
So coming in to sit down, and I'm trying to do my best to be a good podcaster, if you will, Conrad, because you're going to bring heat. You're going to. So I really have tried to be prepared, and the what ifs. But I think there's two things that really go into, look, the father-daughter relationship goes without saying, but the Titans thing, being able to the context that all that happened in the Municipal Auditorium and all that. So that happened in July, but we literally had 6 weeks. And if you think about going into the meeting with the Carters, how we literally said, okay, here's a budget, about $100,000 a week. Okay. So that's 5.2 million a year if we don't make anything. And I'm really brushing over broad numbers, but it happened in July in a municipal auditorium. It gave us around a month to manage our costs, get in a fixed studio. Mr. Carter, here's the blueprint of what we're spending over the next year. And so walking in with all the sizzle of Titans and Toby and all that, but wow, the NFL really checked the box with Bob, but also the managed cost, the fixed cost. here we want to get into this space, and look, here's the comparable of WWE. It's really fascinating to look back on all these years later and see the role that and the timing, because just the timing of everything. It's really fascinating.
I am curious. I'll let you go the whole episode without busting your balls about it, but I am curious.
Go.
Do you feel a little guilty all these years later showing WWE as a comparable?
Oh gosh, no. No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Let me ask you, do you think Tony Khan went to Shad and didn't show WWE as a comparable?
I don't think Tony Khan pitched WWE as a comparable now.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't know that.
Yeah. It's a point of reference to a non-wrestling person. How else do you lay out a financial?
No, I get that. But the idea that you feel like, because when we're saying comparable in the mortgage and real estate and appraisal business, we shorten it to comp. If you're going to use WWE as a comp, you're almost insinuating, now this is what's possible.
Oh, no. Okay. Let me clarify that, because even in deep discussions as the days and months went along, is that we used in a lot of references a 10-to-1. WWE.
I see. So they would be 10x. So if we're going to hope to do 10% of what they're doing.
Yes. I never went outside the box and say we're going to be number one, ever. In my history, I never said, and I always sort of classified it or cached it with Vince as you can say what it is. A 40-year head start is when his father's promotion, or WrestleMania 1 was his head start, whatever it is, just ingrained in the cable television industry, the pay-per-view industry, whatever it may be, a gigantic
head start.
And not just head start. It's that they're first in the space in so many ways. But the comparable being, and I use this a lot of times, the different revenue streams. We can have the same amount of revenue streams, just subtract 4 or 5 zeros. That's what I told Bob, and Bob asked about. Never we were going to be equal.
I got you. So this is how you make money in wrestling, but we're going to make a fraction of what they do. That makes sense to me.
Yes, for sure.
Well, listen, this has been fun. I don't know why, but I think I enjoyed this better than some of our more recent episodes, because I'm just fascinated with the whole what if piece of the entire industry. And this is a big what if. Next week, though, we're doing something a little different. We're going to talk about the WWF. We've talked about a lot of TNA so far, but I know a lot of our listeners have enjoyed it, but just as many, I think, are ready for us to talk about something else. Well, that's happening next week. We're going to talk about In Your House 2 and how you made the decision to walk out on Vince McMahon. Yeah, it happened more than once, boys and girls. I'm not talking about the China deal. I'm talking about fresh off of the Intercontinental Championship run. What do you think we might talk about? Give us a tease. Give us a taste, Jeff, when we talk about you walking out on Vince next week.
And I'll just skip back just a little bit. You were talking about the TNA, and then last week we talked about WCW, and next week WWF at 95. I like the rhythm.
Yep.
I call it the rhythm. Yeah, because the startup of a wrestling company isn't really a Tennessee Titans episode either. It's the same thing as TNA. So no, I like the rhythm. Next week, I think going into the timing of the walkout, the respect I have to this day for Shawn Michaels and Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and that's who I was traveling with day in, day out. Scott, Kevin, me, Road Dogg. That was, we were traveling together, and the respect I had for, I'll say the Intercontinental title. The respect I had for Vince McMahon, me coming into my own of a character I knew, anybody knew. Me and Brian got red hot from January, and now we're going to split it up in July. Wow. The mindset of we're going to yank the rug out from under me and Brian in 6 months. And it took us, collectively a year to build Double J, and we were just getting going. I just felt it was so premature. My lack of communication, I'll say that. Just God almighty, a ball buster. But learn, live and learn. And then you just sort of that night, I'll tell you what, Rene Goulet chasing Road Dogg around, wanting him to take a test, and it wasn't a math test. And I mean, that go with it. But yeah, it's a story. And I've certainly never gone into detail like I'll go next week, just because I didn't think it was the platform but now that you've given me the opportunity, and look, we're going to have an hour or 2 hours, or for God's sakes, if I go on too many sidebars, 3 hours. No, we won't do that.
We love your sidebars. I mean, I know the internet.
You chastise me.
Well, occasionally it gets a little out there. Now here's the thing. I like what I speak Jeff, but I think a lot of our listeners they're learning how to speak Jeff. So sometimes I'll say, hey, hang on now, circle back. Like when we talked about the booker and the writer today. But listen, this was fun. I enjoyed today's episode a lot. I think it's such a fascinating story of perseverance and of opportunity. And I don't know, it's been fun talking about TNA, but I am excited to talk about another moment in time next week. Because listen, I think a lot of this, we're having fun here. And certainly, I mean, I think our podcasts are probably like infotainment. We're going to give you some information, but we're also going to try to entertain you.
Sure.
And I think next week, I mean, you're honest enough with yourself to look back and say, boy, I didn't communicate well. I mean, even when you and I first started talking, you were like, listen, I've learned to over communicate, blah, blah, blah. I just think you looking back and saying, wish I had that to do over again in certain instances, that's going to make for a compelling show. So I'm excited about next week.
And one other thing, the live performance of singing the song, the lip singing the song, or however you want to say it, that in a lot of ways, I here's this kid from Nashville, and I'm getting to perform this song in front of a pay-per-view audience, but in my hometown with a real live band. I was so amped just to do that, let alone go out and tear the house down with Sean. I mean, it was really a big night in my career, and I was a kid.
And we're going to break it down next week. And yes, I will be busting his balls. Don't miss it. We'll be back next week right here on My World.
Peace.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.